Welcome to Health Tech Heroes, where we talk to innovators who are rewriting the DNA of healthcare. Today, we are joined by Dr. Christopher O'Connor, who embodies a unique duality in healthcare. For 25 years, he has served as a critical care physician at Trillium Health Partners, all while establishing himself as a seasoned health tech entrepreneur. His journey into the nexus of medicine and technology began with his role as Director of Medical Informatics, which laid the groundwork for his major venture, Think Research, a company he founded and led for 14 years. Continuing his mission to innovate, Dr. O'Connor is now the CEO of FirstHx. With a deep foundation in both medicine and entrepreneurship, he brings an invaluable perspective to the industry. We are thrilled to have him here to discuss the journey, the lessons he has learned, and his vision for the future of healthcare. Welcome to Health Tech Heroes, Dr. O'Connor.
Thank you very much for having me. I'm very excited to be here.
Just for the records, I met you a couple of days ago in a conference and had a really good conversation. I thought you'd be an incredible guest at my podcast, and thank you for honoring us. With 25 years on the front lines as a critical care physician, can you share a pivotal moment from the ICU that ignited your passion for improving healthcare through technology?
I still remember the day, way back in the day, that it all began. And it started with the problem, which was for my patients to get the treatments they needed in the hospital, I had to order them. And for me to order them at that time, I had to write them down on a piece of paper, and I had to remember them all by memory from scratch each individual time. ICU patients are complicated. They would need anywhere from 40, 15 times 100 different orders. And the thing that just got me going initially was it was a lot of work. And I was writing the same things down over and over again. And I thought, well, what if we could just build a simple little checklist of the common things I order? And I went to build the checklist. I thought it would take me 15 minutes to do, because how complicated could that be? And it turns out insanely complicated. And I'm here like 25 years, still hard working away at essentially the same problem, sort of the same problem set. But that's how it began, out of a frustration of how the current system worked.
And this all started with building a checklist and perhaps with paper and pen first. That is probably the earliest technology that you brought in. And a little bit deeper into it, what was your first approach to solving this issue?
So I go to build the checklist, and then I realize this is a bit complicated. So the good news was this thing works. It definitely saved me time. The challenging news is that at the time, I had to figure out what goes into an order set, what doesn't go into an order set. I had to figure out, if you've got 100 or 200 orders, how do you structure them in a way that is easy to find and organize everything? How do you make the order set available at the point of care? How do you get them approved for use? There is an organizational process. So it was a very multi-domain problem. It was tech, it was knowledge, it was hospital process, all tied in together to get it to work. And so I had to invent most of those things from scratch. And then a big milestone, we did a study of the impact of order sets on ordering of key processes. Back then, VTE prophylaxis, or preventing blood clots in legs, was a big thing. And we found, just by implementing the order sets, that the ordering of that went from 10 to 40%. Which was a spectacular result. And then at the same time, it improved all kinds of other things. It increased the ordering of some lab tests, decreased the ordering of other things. It was extremely impactful. And then I said, oh my goodness, this is spectacular. I went on to publish that result. And then I had the insight, like, why is every hospital building their own order sets from scratch? Can't we learn? Is there this thing called the internet? It's far enough back, like open source software was a thing. And I thought, could we create a learning ecosystem where hospitals could build it in a collaborative framework, and that would enable to build it easier with less effort, but also build them better. And so with that idea, I founded Think Research in 2006. And that's what got me doing this.
Specifically, Think Research, Dr. O'Connor, what is the impetus behind the name itself? It is Think and Research. It sounds more like a research institute than a for-profit company, but what was the idea behind it?
The original name of the company was Open Source Order Sets. because it was an open source ecosystem, although the software people didn't like it because it wasn't open source in the sense of the open source software, but that was the idea. The next name for it was patient order sets, describing that it was order sets. And then as the soon to be named Think went into other areas other than just order sets, they wanted a more generic name, and that's where it came from. But yeah, you're right. That being said, order sets were a good foundation for research because they were a structured, curated knowledge set that did support research, but it supported so many other things as well, too.
So it was much beyond the order sets, and it was like actually a research-oriented company. And being a physician, being a scientist by nature, it kind of made sense to make it a more of a research endeavor.
There was an element of that, the core value proposition, and this is the fact that I think gets overlooked a lot in healthcare IT, is that it made the life of the physician or the provider easier, saved me time. I could complete the patient's orders in 1/5 the time using an order set than not using an order set. And that's true whether it's in paper or whether it's computerized. So that value prop, and it's that drove adoption. And then the fact that it dramatically improved the adherence of ordering of evidence-based best practices, that was awesome. But without the improvement in efficiency, you then wouldn't get to the adoption of the best practices. So those were the big drivers of the growth of Think Research.
So you said 1/5 of the time was saved. This was right from the beginning, or it is the
80%
metric
of the
which is...
time. It used to take, if you had to think up all the orders that you had to do for a patient being admitted to hospital, and say they've got congestive heart failure. You got to remember all the diet, all the activity, all the vital signs orders, all the lab tests, all the diagnostic imaging, all the different drugs that the patient needed. It's a huge list of things. And if I have to remember that from scratch each individual time, that is a lot of effort. That takes time. And then the other issue is you can forget stuff. And so if you have to write 100 things down by memory from scratch every time, or even order it in computer, the risk of forgetting something is extremely high. And I certainly, one of my motivating events was early on that I saw a patient who had something that was an order that they needed. And I said, if it had just been an order in the order set, it wouldn't have been missed. And so that impact on quality had a huge influence on my practice. The other thing that had there are a whole bunch of things, but one of the things that had a big practice was there was an analysis of ordering of nitric oxide across neonates in large academic pediatric centers that was done. And some hospitals weaned it in the order set in 48 hours. Some hospitals weaned it in 2 hours. And it's a very expensive drug. And I said, I don't know much about nitric oxide, but I do know that both 2 and 48 are not the right answer. So let's learn from each other, right? Because this is a function of everybody working alone and nobody learns from each other. So the idea was creating this network, and it was a huge success. We grew projects, Think grew to projects across 8 countries. So we had projects in the United States, Canada, Iceland, Ireland, Saudi Arabia, United Arab Emirates, and India at one point. And that was so much, it was just such an incredible experience to see it grow and to scale to so many different countries. And it was a very exciting time.
So where was the answer? 2 or the 48, which was closer?
I don't know. Stay tuned. That's the next episode. I think the key thing is just building the tool so that people can learn from each other. See, I'm inherently a process guy. I want to build the process and to build the ecosystem, and then let the experts, they can resolve that. But I'm going to give them the tools so that we can actually have a structured, intelligent conversation about it.
I was just curious about that metric. Yeah, it is a pretty disparate number. This brings me to a very important question. Sometimes there is a motivation to get into things, but things that drive you to keep doing it day after day. And especially somebody like you are essentially have 2 high intense jobs of being an entrepreneur and being a physician. How do you manage this? What drives you? What is the kind of mindset that you bring to work, wakes you up every day morning and keeps you going day after day, month after month, year after year?
I mean, I think 2 things. First, I love it. I find it endlessly interesting. It's so interesting. It's medicine, it's tech, it's business, hospital, like it's everything. And I find all of that interesting. And I love that. I love the challenge and I love making an impact. And so that we could build something that's going to scale and have an impact, across millions of lives, that's extremely meaningful. And that's worth getting out of bed for in the morning.
So basically, you found a passion and you're going with this. So let me step back in timeline a little bit before we get into the next stage. Far back when you were in high school, perhaps in middle school, when did you actually decide to get into healthcare? Because there's so many options to go in. It seems like you're super interested in tech, so you could have been an engineer. But why did you start with health tech? Was there anything that you can share with us that made the change, that was a decision or an incident that helped you decide?
I think if there's a lesson from my career arc is that just to keep trying and keep going and try many things. When I went to undergraduate university, I didn't know what I wanted to do. So I took biology and political science at the same time. I was a biology, political science co-major, which earned me ridicule from both sides. The biologists thought it was ridiculous, and the poli sci people thought it was ridiculous as well, too. That was interesting. But then eventually I settled on the biology thing because I liked the fact that it was objective, and I had never thought of going to medical school. And then I met some people in undergraduate life sciences who were interested in that. Actually, the girl I was trying to date at the time wanted to get into medical school. So she taught, I learned all about it from her. And I don't know if I should say that or not. But anyway, so that opened my eyes to getting into medicine. I get into medical school. I initially go into primary care and then not sure what to do. And then I eventually go back and do general internal medicine, critical care, respirology, and sleep medicine. But I have gone through a whole bunch of different iterations. And then when I got to Trillium, where I now work, I was the director of medical informatics for a while. So big in-house IT project. I was interested back then. Physicians had pagers. I'm dating myself here. I had the idea, why are we paging each other when there's these things called Blackberries? So I gave Blackberries to everybody. When that was a huge project, that was super exciting. I like that. So I was thinking of going into mobile for a while, but then I got going with the order sets, and then I just saw how impactful that was. And then that's where I ended up.
So the overarch, if you have to put your immense career and success into one sentence, you always kept your mind open. And whenever the opportunities arise, whenever you saw a problem, you tended to solve it. And I think that brings us neatly to our next topic, a little bit focus on first history. And let's talk about your current venture, that is the first history. And what is the core problem in healthcare that first history aims to solve? And little bit on its name itself. What do you mean by first history?
It's a great question. So history in healthcare refers to that interview you have with your healthcare provider, be it a physician or nurse practitioner. And it's that question and answer that they do at the start of your time with them, like where does it hurt and what makes it better and worse? That question and answer is called taking a history or your history. And a couple of things about it. One is it's super important. Data from that helps diagnose you, treat you, underpins a lot of your healthcare. Two, super time consuming. Think about the last time you spoke to your provider. It often can take, 40, 50, sometimes 70% of your time with your clinician is just them asking you questions. And three, it's an unstructured analog process that if we took your great-great-great-grandmother and dropped her into the exam room, she wouldn't recognize much. The computers and all of that wouldn't look the same, but she would recognize the interview. And so the idea behind First History, could we use technology to improve this process? What if we could replicate the medical interview before you see your clinician on your smartphone so that each question that's asked is based on the previous answer? Because when I conduct an interview, that's how I do it. So we replicate that on the smartphone? Could we have something that patients love to engage with, not something they don't like engaging with? One of the things I say right now is either the interview or forms. When everybody's been in physician wait rooms, completing out forms, everybody's been there. I've yet to meet one person who enjoys a good form fill. So forms are awful. And so could we create a great experience for patients? And then the third part is, could we collect complete, consistent, relevant, and structured data from the process so that we could now, power the entire healthcare journey with a better, more complete structured data set. And that's the core thing that First History is doing.
And you partner with the clinics or the hospitals. And these are the hospitals who send out the app or a link to the patient, and they click on the link, download the app, and go through the process. Is that right, Dr. O'Connor?
First History is web-based. So The typical workflow, and there's a number of different workflows, lots of ways, but the common workflow is you make an appointment to see your provider. At the time they send a text to your phone, you click on the link, and then it opens First History. Web-based, so there's no app to, super easy for the patient. Average time for patients to complete a First History is just over 4 minutes. So it's very, very efficient. Our average patient approval rating, 95%. Biggest surprise of my professional life. So I show up at First History. The main reason I joined initially is taking histories is slow and hard. And if I can have something that just makes it a bit easier, like sign me up yesterday. And so the idea that you could have an application asking the questions was awesome. And then I could start further ahead. So 2 months into it, I go into the back end of First History where I can see the patient opinions of First History. And I was expecting patients, they've got reasons to be unhappy. They're unwell and the healthcare system can be a challenge. And what I found was 95% approval. They loved it. And there were all kinds of positive comments about this really helped me. It helped me prepare for the interview. They adored it. And that was a very big surprise. And then I realized it's not just me who has a challenge in the interview, the patient has a challenge. And think about the last time you went to see your clinician. You have no idea what they're going to ask you. They ask you all these questions. You go in unprepared. And patients, and this is the literature which I've read since coming to First History, patients feel rushed, interrupted, frequently don't get their stories heard, and often, not always, but often have an unsatisfactory experience. And so the fact that First History can help patients express their story in a clear way every single time, it's one of the most impactful things we do.
I have asked these questions before, Dr. O'Connor, when I had met you in person. Are there any elderly population that you feel that are going to be left behind in this? Because, say, Medicare population, for example, or in your experience that you have had pretty good coverage regardless of socioeconomic condition or the age or whatever, however you cut the demography.
So health equity is obviously a very important issue. We take it very seriously. Our completion rates are the same between 5 years of age, like pediatrics with parents, all the way up to patients. Our oldest patient is 101. Our completion rates are the same. And when you think about it, it kind of makes sense. My parents are a bit elderly at this point in time. And what do elderly patients have? They often have a fair bit of time and they want to talk about their health. And so this is a tool that helps them. We see that they take longer on the back end. We can see what takes younger populations 5 minutes will take them 12 minutes, but they're still completing it. And to me, that just speaks to that it's clearly valuable to them, taking them through it, and whether they're doing it on their own or sometimes they do it with their kids, that it still is a very valuable process for them. And then the other aspects these days, almost everybody has a smartphone. It's very rare for people to not have a smartphone or not have smartphone access. For the infrequent populations where that may be the case, we can work on kiosks, tablets, and other devices. So the access at this today is not a problem. And one of the things, it seems like a long time ago, but one of the big things COVID did is that it normalized the use of mobile devices in healthcare. Before COVID, that was not normal. We take it for granted now. Before COVID, I tried to do this in 2018. It was not going to work. Smartphone penetration was less and it wasn't accepted. Now, everybody just takes it as a given, which is great.
And perhaps a little bit of less resistance from the regulation perspective too, right? I mean, like even the clinicians or the compliance within the hospital too.
Everything's gotten better in terms of this. The tech stack is better. The form factor is better. The iPhone 17 just came out. It's better. The tech's better. Wireless is better. Wi-Fi is better. Wi-Fi used to be a big issue. Now Wi-Fi is everywhere. And so having all of those background things all get better, they're all supportive for a seamless experience for the patient. And that's what you ultimately need if you're going to have them adopt and use the technology.
One question that I had with the patients entering their data on the software, what I have heard is when people actually are allowed to enter the data behind a screen rather than actually admit the data to the person, they are a little bit more open to saying things that they wouldn't say to the nurse or a doctor directly. Have you found that the patients are giving out more accurate and more candid information to you on the app?
Absolutely. We have lots of anecdotal stories where patients have told things to their phone that they hadn't told to the provider. Sometimes being with a provider like for a decade. And then for the first time, when they get a First History, then they feel comfortable talking about a matter that they perceive as sensitive. So I think this is a big area of impact. We haven't studied it formally. It is on our roadmap to do because I think it's important. And I think it's one of the reasons why First History works so well is because we're not trying to replace the physician or nurse practitioner. We're working with and trying to make better. And because we're a working with tool, then I think we deliver real benefit. And if we help that patient say that thing that they weren't comfortable initially bringing up in person, what that's really doing is just creating the framework for a meaningful conversation because it doesn't end there. It sets up the
Yeah.
conversation that follows between the patient and their clinician. And that's the real benefit.
I hope I'm digging a little bit deeper into first history here. I hope you're okay with that, Dr. O'Connor. And since it is structured data, do you also help give a summary of the first history? Because that is probably was not possible because the data was not structured. The physicians have to come up with a summary of the whole data.
So the clinicians tend to work within their own working note. We can produce a bulleted out list like all the pertinent positives, all the pertinent negative symptoms, past medical history, medications, allergies, social determinants of health, clinical trial eligibility, adherence to guideline directed medical therapy. We can include all of that in the note and we get it in a bulleted structured format, or we can put it in a narrative paragraph if they want as well too. And then that can be used for if you're a specialist and you want to send a note back to your referring physician, you can use it for that. And because of AI, we can structure the note in any way that you like. If you're a physician and you want past medical history first, we can do that. If you want medications first, you name it, we can do it. And we can meet all the different templates and different ways of organizing it. So whatever whatever you need, we can do.
Just a quick question. Is this customized to a particular physician or it is customized at a practice level?
So it's 100% customizable. We can customize at the physician level, practice level, clinic level, depending on the environment and depending what your objective is. Like if you're a chain of clinics, you might want standardized content across all of your providers because standardization is a good thing. The other thing we say is because we built up all of these experiences, we have these libraries of content. We say to people, use it for a week or two, get used to it. And because it's a new tool, you haven't had one of these things before. One of the things that as a physician or a nurse or a nurse practitioner is over the years, you've developed a sense of what questions you can ask or not ask, because it takes time to ask a question and listen for the answers. You're always saying, is the time to ask this worth it? Or am I just not going to ask? And with First History, that's no longer a consideration. It doesn't cost you any time to ask a question. There was a study back in 2022, a bit of a famous study that said there's 27 hours of work in an average primary care physician's office day, and yet they've only got 8 hours to do it in. And so to implement all the evidence-based practice, do everything you have to do, there's way more to do than they have time to do. And I think people would say, yeah, that's clearly true. So as a result, people don't typically have time to do everything. And so one of the things First History can do by asking all those questions, it can save time and then actually give you a complete data set, which will improve quality and actually drive even more efficiency in your practice. So it's a double win. You get better quality and better efficiency, and it helps with everything else. It can screen for clinical trials as part of the history process if you want that. It can help with revenue cycle and charge capture because you got more complete documentation. So there's a revenue aspect to it, which is important. So it can do so many different things precisely because the data it captures is at the center of everything.
Terrific. Thank you very much for that. So basically, you don't have to compromise any of the levers. You can pull all the levers, quantity, quality, efficiency. And essentially, it's like, hey, let's pull the efficiency, compromise on quality a little bit, quantity. No, you're pulling all the levers. So that's pretty cool.
It's so critical because if you want something to scale, that is the only way it can happen. I've read so many articles in the quality literature over the years, which said if you deploy a massive amount of effort and a massive amount of cost, we improve one thing, but I don't have massive time, and so you need something that
Exactly.
for it to be adopted doesn't cost you time because nobody's got time. Like if there's anybody listening to this podcast who has time, please call me because I haven't met anybody who's got extra time. I'd be curious to hear what that feels like. So nobody's got any time. So if you implement things that cost people time, it's just a non-starter. It's just you're never going to get there. So you've got to save people time. And so the great thing by First History asking all the questions, that's the starting position for First History. It's going to save you time. Now, the fact that it does all these other things, well, that's just, it's icing on the cake. It's also super cool, but, it does start with saving time.
So the next question is, I see the value, and I think there are a million ways to monetize this, but how are you monetizing? Like, essentially, the question is, who is paying for it and why are they paying for it?
So first of all, where we're deployed, and the answer is everywhere. Like where our history's done, they're done everywhere. So we're in primary care offices, specialty clinics, we're in emerge departments, virtual care platforms, you name it, we're there because it's quite literally used everywhere. And then who pays and what the model is equally diverse. So it's software as a service. There's nothing to install or maintain. And so we can monetize, people, we're a business, we got to keep the lights on. So people can pay per history, they can pay per clinician, enterprise SaaS fee. There's all kinds of different ways in terms of payment models that that we can do. The key thing is we're completely flexible, so we can meet your needs. And the other thing, which is important, and I'm sensitive to this given my clinical background, is we're extremely affordable. So we're not a super expensive solution, and we don't tie people down with long commitments. If you don't like us, you don't have to use us. People like us. That's why it's easy to say that. But so we're a cost-effective, easy to deploy, immediate benefit solution. And that's the other thing. There was a recent study done out of the University of Alberta that looked at the impact of using First History with a scribe, because scribes are common these days. And they found that the combination together improved efficiency about 30%. What was fantastic about this study, and that's cool, and I wasn't actually surprised. I know these things speed you up, and the fact that we improved efficiency like that was great. What was great about this study, though, was that effect was seen. They only measured it on the first patient. So you see the impact immediately. Like you don't have to sit around and train on this thing. You see the benefit immediately. And I think that's awesome.
Terrific. And do you dream of a day where patient can carry this data with them to say they're going to a different specialty in a different health system, but then they have to do the first history one more time? Is there a way we can translate this so that they don't have to do it again?
Well, 100%. In a way, the one thing that the patient truly owns unambiguously is their story. Like your history is your history. Like your lab tests, other people have an ownership stake. Your diagnostic imaging, a lot of your stuff is co-owned or outrightly owned by other parts of the healthcare ecosystem. But your history is yours and it should be you and reside with you. And I think that's an exciting area of potential growth in the future.
What has been your biggest win, the win that you talk about at the dinner table with your friends and family? And what have been your challenges?
Biggest win, 2, patient experience, awesome, so rewarding. The second biggest win was deployment and go live with the Gen 2 platform with our advanced features. And so now we can and we've been live with that for just over a year, but our data and analytics platform went live in May, and that's been awesome because now we can do so many awesome things. That's when we can screen for clinical trials, measure adherence to guideline-directed medical therapy, geomap all of our data, track adherence. Like it's fantastically powerful. And we can deploy standardized content across multiple different sites. So that's fantastically exciting. That would be a huge accomplishment. What are the barriers? Number one barrier, there's a couple of barriers. One is people think it's too good to be true. I say, hey, I tell there's a group of people where I tell it everything you can do, and they don't believe it. Okay, fine. We'll get to those people. I think the status quo in healthcare is a barrier. Like people are used to doing the same thing, and so that can definitely be a barrier for sure. Those would be the number one and number two things.
Switching over to a future vision, and you have been both a physician and a tech CEO. What do you think is going to be the most impactful and exciting trends going into the future, perhaps in 2 or 3 years? If that's too long, like next year.
My answer is going to be everything. And actually, when you think of the history of tech, because I've been around a little bit, if you think of tech in the 90s and zeros and whatnot, really the thing that's brought us to where we are today is just relentless improvement across, is it internet speed? Is it wireless? Is it UI, UX? Is it the quality of the programs that we use? And the answer is everything's getting better. And I think everybody's excited about AI and the impact is going to be awesome, but we still have to do the mundane work of incorporating into clinical workflow. And we're still sort of sorting out what exactly generative AI is good at, what it's not so good at, all the regulations and all that stuff, privacy, security, and all of that. And I think that's all being sort of sorted out in real time. And I mean, we're early. This is early in the journey, right? I mean, it's going to be 10 and 20 years out. And so I'm really excited to see as we incorporate these tools in an ever more deep and useful way that makes our lives better and
Yeah.
not worse. And so I think that's the core challenge is to incorporate them intelligently.
What would be your advice to the leaders in tech area and physician leaders as well? What are we looking for? How can we actually be very intelligent in implementing so to make sure that the frontline workers and definitely the patients are the biggest, are equal, at least equal beneficiaries of all these tech advancements?
So I think a couple of sides to it. I think for larger organizations, I think Toby from Shopify has been pretty smart about it in terms of measure everything and iterate constantly. And don't be afraid to fail. Because if you're not failing from time to time in a way, it means you're not trying hard enough. Like if everything
Okay.
works all the time. And so I think having a culture in larger organizations that support that, I think that's invaluable. I think it's hard to do, but I think if you can do that, there's a real payoff, and you're willing to take some risks, and then you're willing to do new things as they come along. I think that's going to be critical.
Okay, terrific. Dr. O'Connor, this is like, I will regret if I don't ask in spite of we running out of time, I'll take the risk, is that when you said, don't be afraid to fail, right? How do you see that fail in healthcare? Because in healthcare, there might be an argument that the margin for failure is low compared to, say, a consumer product. How do you see failure as not a negative thing in healthcare, but a positive thing? Can you give an example? Can you elucidate that for me and us?
Yeah, I think so. Failure can mean many different things. I think when it comes to discovering new drugs and deploying them, like you don't want to fail in the way that you're building drugs that are toxic and releasing those out. And that's why we have the FDA and all that framework, which is critical. So it's not that, but it's like experimenting around new modes of care delivery and new ways of organizing your team, or even just new ways potentially of configuring your EMR or all those kinds of things. A lot of process innovation can pay off huge benefits, and I'm sure you've heard people say that if we just implemented all the treatments that we have today effectively, that would have a huge impact. So for example, right, the most recent literature, only 15% of congestive heart failure patients in the United States are receiving all of the treatment they need at this point in time. There is a large gap. That's a big miss. And so then the question is, how do we go from there to the number that it should be? And it's innovation around what is the processes, what can we do to try to close the gap of where we are, where we need to go? And on that front, I think lots of experimentation is called for. I think it's not going to be one size fits all. Healthcare systems are heterogeneous, patients are heterogeneous. And I think if we're going to get these treatments effectively to the patient populations who need it, we are going to have to experiment and figure out what the best approach is. I think that's important.
Thank you very much for that clarity, Dr. O'Connor. So you will have 90 seconds to share anything I might have missed in my questions or you think is really important to reiterate. And essentially, it does not have to be 90 seconds. If you want to take more, you're more than welcome to do so. Essentially, the question is yours, the answer is yours, and the stage is yours. Dr. O'Connor.
I'd like to say, I think the most exciting opportunity now is precisely around when we have these effective medications, such as heart failure, and then getting them to the patients reliably every single time. I think there's an incredible opportunity there. And I think certainly my life's work is devoted towards trying to make that a reality. And with AI and how technology is improving these days, I think we now have the potential to do things that people had thought about 10 or 20 years ago, I think are now going to enter the realm of the possible. But that doesn't mean that it's just going to happen on its own. It's going to take a lot of hard work. We're going to have to be very thoughtful around how to make it. Like there's a lot of still hard problems to be solved. And it's not that gets me out of bed in the morning. gets me excited solving, and that we can improve all of these things. So yeah, I just end on that thought.
And with that, I truly, truly appreciate your time, Dr. O'Connor, and I see the depth. I want to point out that you said my life's work. I see the depth in that life's work and the passion behind it, and I wish you all the luck. And I think you have achieved more than most people would achieve in 3 lifetimes already. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much.